Welcome back to MSNBC. And hey, America, we're broke, in debt up to our eyeballs, and looking at China and the Middle East holding our mortgage. President Obama has tapped Jacob Lew to be his new budget director to whip America's budget into shape and to tackle our strangling deficit.
Jack's challenge over the next few years is to use his extraordinary skill and experience to cut down that deficit and put our nation back on a fiscally responsible path.
Well, good luck with that. Our debt tops $13 trillion. I mean, can you even conceive of that number? How's this? To pay it off, every taxpayer would need to chip in $119,000 each. Any takers? The president commissioned a group of experts to tackle the problem, and the chairman wasn't so optimistic. He said this debt is like a cancer. It is truly going to destroy the country from within. Dan Mitchell is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Michael Linden is associate director for tax and budget policy at the Center for American Progress. Michael, let me begin with you. Do you see a problem with debt so crushing that even the folks who've been tasked with deciding how important it is to our society says it's going to eat us alive?
Yeah, the debt is a real problem. It's not a problem right now, but everybody agrees that it will be a problem in the next 10 years if we don't do something about it. I don't think there's any real disagreement about that. The big disagreement is how do we get the deficit down? Do we be responsible and let the Bush tax cuts expire on the wealthy, cut down on government waste, cut back on the Defense Department, find new ways to raise revenue, or do we pretend that tax cuts pay for themselves and just continue?
Your organization, Center for American Progress, points out a Pew poll asking the public if they would approve various spending cuts to balance their state budgets. Did they want to see schools cut? Did they want to see fire and police cut? And the answer overwhelmingly was no. Right. That seems to be the problem, that American taxpayers want it all. They want lower taxes, but they want spending in their schools. And yes, they want to balance deficit, but they don't want the states to balance their budgets by cutting any of their local services.
Right. That's the central problem. I mean, it's worth pointing out that this is actually not an economic problem. We're the wealthiest country in the world. We tax ourselves at a very low rate compared to other advanced democracies. And it's not as if we're paying for things that we don't want. We like the things we are getting from the government, schools and roads and security. We just need to pay for them.
And okay, so the last couple years, Dan, we've heard this argument from a lot of economists that unless the government injected a whole lot of cash into the system, spent money, made sure that people were getting hired on these shovel-ready projects, we would see our economy implode. Has all of this extra spending saved America's economy?
No, all this extra spending was based on the discredited notion of Keynesian economics, which is the idea that you take money out of your left pocket and you put it in your right pocket and somehow you have more money. Well, it didn't work for Hoover and Roosevelt in the 30s. It didn't work for Japan in the 1990s. It didn't work for Bush in 2008. And of course, it's not working for Obama now. All we've done is dig ourselves deeper and deeper into debt. But the key thing to understand, and this is where Michael and I probably disagree a bit, our problem is not deficits and debt. The deficits and debt are simply the symptom of government that is far too big.
Right, but
because
Dan,
I disagree with Michael. I don't want us to be like Greece.
Wait. When you say, I don't want us to be like Greece either. I don't know anybody who wants us to be like Greece with riots because they've given so many pensions and benefits to people and allowed so many people not to pay taxes that the system is literally crumbling over. I mean, this is like Atlas Shrugged. That being said, my understanding from what I've read about FDR, the Conservation Corps, the public spending that happened is not only did it help put Americans back to work, it created an amazing infrastructure.
Right.
No, if you look at what happened...
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
If you look at what happened in the 1930s, unemployment averaged 17% throughout the decade, and even FDR's Treasury Secretary in either 1938 or 1939, I don't remember exactly, basically admitted in testimony to Congress that we've spent all this money and it's had no positive effect. And you just had a couple of economists with an article in the Journal of Political Economy saying that the Hoover-Roosevelt policies extended the Great Depression by 7 years. It was a giant failure.
Listen, guys,
and why Bush and Obama are repeating that is crazy.
That is such a minority point of view. It's really important to point out that Dan is in the extreme minority here. Okay, it's really important that people understand that nobody else except for Dan and the Cato Institute think that that's true.
All right, Dan, Michael,
and
you guys,
lots of Nobel Prize winners as well.
And I'm not a Nobel Prize winner. I'm just up against a hard end to this and a topic that is concerning to Americans. I mean, if